This is a problem from the homework that gives you a cation. In this case, it's 10, 4 plus right here. And then they give you anions, and they want you to write the formula as well as name it. So to write the formula, you need the two ions, which we have. The cation is always written first, so the 10, this is 10 with a Roman numeral 4 because 10 can have a 2 plus and a 4 plus cation. So it's 10, 4, and then the polyatomic ion they give you is H2PO4 with a negative. So remember, polyatomic ions have more than one element that are bonded together, and in this situation, it gained one electron to make that stable. So this one is named dihydrogen phosphate, and it's not one of the polyatomic ions that I want you to remember. There it is right there. But if you come across it on your homework, you might need to use this table of polyatomic ions, which is in your textbook, or I think I also have this on the class presentation slides, or you can always Google polyatomic ions because that would be another resource. So this one has a long name. It's called dihydrogen phosphate right there. So this is dihydrogen phosphate. And so those are the names of the two ions for this letter A. This is the ion and that's the ion. Now, when you're putting them together, the ions, remember the charges need to equal to 0. They need to cancel out. So you first look at the charge, and this one is a 4, and this one is a 1. So the 4 that's a subscript down here says that in this polyatomic ion, there's 4 oxygens. So it's not part of the charge. So we have 4 positives and 1 negative. So it's not just going to cancel out with one of each. So in class, we talked about it's like a shortcut, the mathematical shortcut to figure out how to balance the charges. So for 10, to know how many you need, you will look at the charge of the anion, and since it's a 1, it's going to require 1 10 to cancel this out. So the formula would have just 1 10. Because 10 sounds like the number 10, it's sometimes hard when you're talking about it. So then dihydrogen phosphate, which is this whole thing right there, all of it. You look back at the 10, and 10 has a 4 plus. That means to balance it, it's going to require 4 of the anions. And when you have polyatomic ions that you require more than one, you put a parenthesis. So I write the whole thing in the parentheses, and then I needed 4 of them, and so I'll put a 4 on the outside of the parentheses. So this right here would be the formula when you put 10,4 ion with dihydrogen phosphate. And the thing that I like about naming ionic compounds is you really just name the two ions that are present. So the name of this is going to be a 10,4, that's the cation, dihydrogen phosphate, that's the anion. So we would write it 10,4, like that, then a space, dihydrogen. Okay, I have to go down to write phosphate because it's so long it won't fit there. But it's dihydrogen, and there, if you look down where I wrote it at first, down here, there is a space between the dihydrogen and the phosphate. You could also look here, like that. So let's try the second one. So on the letter B, they still told us to use 10 with a 4 plus. That was the whole problem. So our cation is 10 with a 4 plus. So that's 10, 4. And remember, we're using Roman numerals in the name of the 10 because 10 forms two cations, a 2 plus and a 4 plus. And then PO4, 3 negative, is the polyatomic ion. Now, I'm going to look on this slide again, and this phosphate is one of the ones that I ask you to memorize, and there it is right there. So phosphate is the PO4, 3 negative. So this is a phosphate ion. So to put it together, I will always write the, I guess I don't need to rewrite them, do I? You always write the cation first and the anion second. That's just not something I always do. That is how you do it. You always write the positive ion first, followed by the negative ion. And so you look at the two charges. I have a 4 plus and a 3 negative. I always look at them first because if they're the same number, they cancel out with just one of each. But these are not the same. I have a 4 and a 3. So then I can use my shortcut, the crossover, to figure out how many. So for the 10, I look at the opposite charge, and that is a 3 negative, but it's a 3. So it's going to take 3 10s to cancel. And then for the anion, the phosphate, which is the whole thing, PO4, I look at 10's charge, which is a 4. And so to balance it, I'm going to need 4 phosphates. So I put a parenthesis because I need more than one polyatomic ion. Write it around the phosphate, and then put a 4 on the outside because I need 4 of those groups. To name it, you just name the ions that are there. So this is going to be called 10,4-phosphate. Don't be discouraged by polyatomic ions. It is something that the more you practice, the more your brain starts to see them as a group, and it makes it a little bit easier. But at first, they look confusing because they have so many elements and then all those subscripts. So don't be discouraged if it's a little bit of a challenge at first. Just keep practicing and let me know if you have more questions.